And assalamu alaikum, family. This is your brother Malcolm Flex TV from Changing the Black Narrative. And if you would like to join on to the Nation of Islam and accept your own and be yourself, please send me an email at malcolmflex19@gmail.com. And if you would like a subscription to the Final Call newspaper, you can also go to finalcall.com, because the Final Call newspaper has been within the black community for years and has changed and saved a lot of lives. It has saved minds, for example. And if you would like to hear the latest lectures and webcasts by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and his students, the students of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, you can also go to NOI.org. So if you would like to accept your own and be yourself, I will do my best to direct you to your local mosque and nearest study group. This is your brother Malcolm Flex TV. Peace and assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. This is your brother Malcolm Flex TV, and we are definitely live with an exclusive special interview with our dear brother, dear brother, Demetric Muhammad. And today we will be discussing his groundbreaking and myth-busting book, But Didn't You Kill Malcolm? Right? Because that is definitely a question that is asked by most people outside of the Nation of Islam. Okay, whenever they encounter the brothers and sisters within the Nation of Islam, that's one of the first things that come to their mind. Why? Because the enemy has consistently tried to throw garbage in the well that our people are drinking out of. So without further ado, I would like to bring on one of my brothers who's in the Nation of Islam. He's one of our research ministers. He's one of our scholars in the Nation of Islam. He's one of our brothers. Most importantly, he's a follower of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. You know what I mean? And he's a great person, and this research of this book is so valuable, that everyone needs to read this book. So again, without further ado, I would like to bring our dear brother on, Demetric Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum, Black God.
Wa alaikum salam, Brother Alfonso. How are you, sir?
I'm doing wonderful. And yourself, dear beloved?
I'm fine by the grace and pleasure of Almighty God Allah.
Yes, sir. So this is our second interview, but this is our first interview live and direct. And me and our brother have been talking about doing this interview for quite some time. You know what I mean? The brother's book is phenomenal, and we're gonna end up doing a part 2 to this, okay, to this specific one. And dear brother, you're not a stranger on this platform, but again, this is our first time live. So can you please, the people who don't know you, just kind of give them, a little bit about yourself.
Well, brother, I'm Brother Demetric Muhammad. I'm a student of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, and I serve as a member of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's research team. And I'm an author of, I think, maybe 13 books now. We have a website, researchminister.com, where our books are featured. We also work as a contributing writer for the Final Call newspaper, which is the official organ of the Nation of Islam. And so we're very happy and very honored to have the opportunity to be here with you, my brother, tonight, and your listening audience, as we talk about a very important subject and a very explosive subject, and a subject that certainly has the interest of many men and women around the world.
Okay, all praises due to Allah. So with that being said, family, we're going to have to get into this. So first, beloved, just kind of give us a little background as far as your journey on this particular subject and what inspired this book.
Well, I would say it like this, my brother. You know, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan was inspired and guided by Allah, God, to rebuild the work of his teacher, the eternal leader of the Nation of Islam, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And as the minister began to rebuild the Nation of Islam, he attracted some of the most powerful enemies in the world, particularly those who are the leaders in the Jewish community. And all throughout the minister's storied history of the rebuilding, we have seen him withstand a blistering media onslaught that has been followed by efforts to thwart many of the economic initiatives that the minister has put forth to remedy many issues in the Black community. And so for many years, unfortunately, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan was left to defend himself. And so as the Nation of Islam has began to mature, many in the Nation of Islam have began to understand how to and when to and where to defend the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan against the criticisms of our nefarious adversaries. And beginning in 1994, the New York Post, Gabe Pressman, Jack Newfield, they were the first to put forth before the mainstream media the idea and the notion that Minister Farrakhan was involved in the assassination of Malcolm X. And from 1994 up until today, unfortunately, many in the Black community, especially those who were born in the 90s and thereafter, falsely believe that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan was involved in the assassination of Malcolm X. And so our motivation essentially was a refutation of the lies that have been used against our beloved minister and a defense of him and his teacher, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, principally because of this, my dear brother Alfonso. We bear witness that when we scan the horizon, we see our people besieged with a plethora of problems, spiritual problems, economic problems, domestic problems, all kinds of problems. We got them in the Black community. And yet for the past 90 years, a tried, true, and trusted solution to those problems has existed in the life-giving teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And so whenever there are efforts to slander the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, whenever there are efforts to scandalize the Nation of Islam, it actually interferes with Black America accessing those divine solutions that are contained within this salvific and important message. And so our motivation is a motivation born of love for God, love for the truth, love for the messengers of God, and love for our beloved community who continues to suffer out of fear and ignorance. And so I pray that what Allah has blessed us to publish will go a long way of removing the impediment that exists in the minds of many people, especially the young, that it was the Nation of Islam who killed Malcolm.
All praises is due to Allah, beloved. And one thing that I personally appreciate about you, beloved, and just to kind of give people a little insight on our conversations, especially on this subject. One day, this is probably some months back, me and you were having a conversation and you told me, that it's okay to love the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and love Malcolm X. It's okay to love Malcolm X and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad at the same time. So why is that having that spirit so important? And because it reflects the minister's, spirit so much, but why is that so important?
Well, you're right. That is the spirit that I have gleaned from my teacher, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, who was, pardon me, who was a student and acolyte of Brother Minister Malcolm. And so, whenever I have been in the presence of our beloved minister, whenever I have listened to him discuss the history of Malcolm X, I hear him talk about a group of people, the Nation of Islam during the 1960s, who were like a family, men and women who believed in a cause, men and women who were drawn together in a unity, spiritual men and women, religious men and women who loved one another. When we think about the family dynamic that surrounded the Nation of Islam at that time and today, we understand, based upon our own life's experiences and our own families, that sometimes family members disagree. Sometimes family members are at odds with each other, and vehemently so. But if there is no interference, oftentimes time and distance can produce a reconciliation. But in the case of Minister Malcolm X and his separation and estrangement from his teacher, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, it was the FBI and the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith that worked very hard to ensure that there was to be no reconciliation between Minister Malcolm and the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam. So when we understand the facts, when we go beyond the headlines, when we go beyond the movies that we've watched, when we dig into the details of even the documentaries we've watched, we realize that it's not difficult to love the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Minister Farrakhan, and Malcolm X all at the same time, principally because Malcolm X, the man that is so beloved and admired by Black youth, is essentially the Malcolm that was minister for the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and national spokesman for the Nation of Islam from around the time period of 1952 through early 1964. So that's the Malcolm that everyone knows and loves, the minister of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He made his Declaration of Independence during a press conference in March of 1964. He was assassinated in February of 1965. So again, the time that Malcolm was away from the nation is essentially minuscule by comparison to the time that he was in the nation, a representative of the message, the life-giving message of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam. And his period of time, as we describe in the book, under a manufactured hypocrisy, again, is minuscule. So, of course, I love Minister Malcolm. I love the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I love the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam. And I think that we demonstrate in our book how that is possible, that you don't have to, if you love Malcolm, hate the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. You don't have to, if you love the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, hate Brother Malcolm. When we understand the truth and are courageous enough to go beneath the surface, we find the ability to love both and settle on the best part of our brother, Minister Malcolm.
All praises is due to Allah, and that struck a chord with me when I heard you say that. You know, that definitely resonated with me because it's something that I've always felt doing the research. But it's something that was I've never expressed it. I've never heard it. I've seen the minister demonstrate it, but it was never articulated before. So when I heard you articulate it, it definitely resonated with me. And I think that it's important for brothers and sisters who are not in the nation, and even some of us who may even feel a way about Malcolm, to get rid of all the poison and the toxicity, between our relationships with one another, to where we can be able to coexist in the community. So let's talk about Malcolm X and the weaponization of popular culture. Because, reading your book, you mentioned, how the enemy tried to sanitize Malcolm's image. And then, when the movie came out, everybody was wearing the X hats, and was really sporty with the Malcolm X gear, but nobody was really living the life and really practicing the disciplines that he practiced. Can we kind of get into that and talk about that a little bit?
When Brother Malcolm was alive, he was not a beloved figure in mainstream America, as evidenced by the fact that many of the major news publications around the country, they published obituaries of Brother Malcolm that we include in the book. And in those obituaries, they excoriated and condemned Brother Malcolm for being a preacher of hate. Fast forward until the late 80s and early 90s, and we see that Malcolm's history and his legacy is brought back into the public eye, and he is being celebrated. He is being promoted. He's being made popular in death, unlike he ever was in life. And so we see that the timing of the resurrection of Minister Malcolm X coincided with the gaining of the momentum of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan in his rebuilding of the Nation of Islam. And you have to understand, dear brother, that many people in the white power structure rejoiced in 1975 and the immediate thereafter because they believed that the Nation of Islam was gone. They believed that the departure of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad signaled the end of this troublesome community of people who, number one, were working to establish Islam, which has been considered a religion that Western countries and societies do not welcome into its borders. Islam, historically and globally, was the great spiritual tradition of the Eastern peoples and the Eastern world. And in the Western world, Christianity was that great spiritual system. And so during the Crusades in Europe, there was this clash of civilizations typified by the clash of religions of Christianity and Islam. Factor in also that in America, where the peculiar institution of slavery, the enslavement of Black people, became the root and the bedrock of American society, they always associated Islam with slaves who would rebel against their masters. So there was great hatred for the Nation of Islam in America all throughout our 90 years of existence. And so when they thought that the nation was gone, they celebrated. Now, when the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan began to rebuild the nation, no one really believed he would be successful. But as the 1980s continued to move on, Louis Farrakhan became a force to be reckoned with. And in 1985, he was heralded by many who loved him and many of his critics to be the premier leader in Black America. He had a mass rally at Madison Square Garden where he filled the garden and he filled the Felt Forum, and there were more people still trying to get in. And so the white power structure began to scramble to find a Black leader that they could support and endorse in opposition to Minister Louis Farrakhan. They found none. And so they went into the history. They went into the proverbial cemeteries, and they actually excavated and lifted a man that during his lifetime they loathed and hated in a similar way that they loathe and hate Minister Farrakhan today, and that was Minister Farrakhan's brother, Minister Malcolm X. And they gave a romanticized and sanitized version of Brother Malcolm to Black youth, many of whom had already fallen in love with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And then they said, well, we will make Black youth love Brother Malcolm because Brother Malcolm is not here to be a problem for us, and he's not here for the youth to actually follow, but he'll be a harmless icon. He'll be someone we can emblazon t-shirts and posters with and do films about, but we don't have to worry because living people require a living leader in order to lead them out of oppression. And so we see that Brother Malcolm's legacy has been perverted. We see that Brother Malcolm's history has been co-opted and twisted to be a weapon against the very thing that Malcolm was an integral instrument in becoming successful, and that is the Nation of Islam. And in this case, the rebuilt Nation of Islam under the leadership of Minister Farrakhan. So, as you know, Brother Alfonso, we say in the book, Malcolm was resurrected for the purpose of burying Minister Farrakhan.
And so, and what's your response to the brothers and sisters who are outside of the nation, but they take this propaganda that's really used as a weapon by the enemy toward the Nation of Islam, and they're holding the same weapon up that the enemy is holding? What is your response to brothers and sisters who do this?
Well, the short answer is read my book.
I like that.
That's
I like
the
that.
short answer. Read
Right.
my book.
Right.
But I would add to that this. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said famously, if there's a man who will not treat you right, then you could not expect that same man to teach you right. So when you look at the sources for what publicly is accepted as a narrative surrounding Malcolm X, you come to find out that those sources are by and large corporate sources, entities that are white controlled. Now just check the record for a moment. Just
Wow.
reflect.
Wow.
Malcolm was a man that called the white man the devil. And we prove in our book that even after he came back from his so-called epiphany at Mecca, his view and his position against white supremacy had not waned. He had not become this integrationist that he's often, the sanitized version of Malcolm often tries to make us to believe. Quite the contrary. Those who studied his messages and performed a content analysis of his messages even after he came back from Mecca have conclusively and scientifically proven Brother Malcolm's views and positions against white supremacy in America had not changed, you see. So why would we expect for those that were Malcolm's enemies in life to tell the truth about Malcolm in death?
Yes, sir. And another part of your book, the strategic use of propaganda, that's another powerful chapter, because like you said, that they use Malcolm, they try to resurrect Malcolm to bury the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. The minister said that on several occasions, and they use Hollywood, because there's an FBI document exposing how the FBI had sources in Hollywood, and they knew about the Malcolm X movie like almost 30 years prior to the actual movie came out, and Spike Lee had bought the movie, And he wanted to. I think he got. I think it was brother Baldwin. Our brother Baldwin, his original script, but they just changed the name of it and just called it Malcolm X. And so the enemy tried to use the movie, and not only that movie, but the Godfather of Harlem as well, against the Nation of Islam. So why is it important that we have books like this refuting these claims and busting up these myths? Because we going up against an entity, like you said, these are corporate entities, and Hollywood is very powerful, and they have a pull on the minds of our people. So what are your thoughts about that, Brother Demetric?
Well, I cannot disagree with what you have shared, my dear brother. And I would say that in the book, we go into detail about the relationships with Warner Brothers and the FBI. And we also talk about how there were various scripts that were being considered by Hollywood studios to portray the life of Malcolm X. And J. Edgar Hoover insisted on reviewing and approving or rejecting those scripts. And so at that time in the 70s, it's clear that Mr. Hoover had not approved any of the scripts because the major big budget film about Brother Malcolm did not come until the 1990s. But that does not mean that the FBI in the 90s was not involved in the content, in the direction of the movie. Fact about it, we include an important interview between Spike Lee and Professor Henry Louis Gates. Now, again, in the history of Warner Brothers, which is a Jewish company, they had partnered with Hoover's FBI in the 50s and 60s, seeking to expose those who were anti-Semites in Hollywood. In 1990, they gave Spike Lee $18 million to do the movie. And Spike told Professor Gates that he was under no illusion. He knew that Warner Brothers was interested in emphasizing the, quote, post-Mecca Malcolm, where he stopped calling white people blue-eyed devils. And so here we have what is taking place in the legacy of Brother Malcolm, in truth, is part of an overall work that I have called the corruption of Black history. What do I mean by that? There was a great Russian leader, Mr. Vladimir Lenin. He wasn't great for Black people, but he was great to the Russian people. But he had an important statement that he made that I felt it was worth quoting, because he talked about how when revolutionary leaders are alive, they are fighting against the power structure of their day and time. And the power structure opposes them and seeks to destroy them in their work. And when they eventually die, the power structure will raise them up as though they were a saint, and then give a false narrative, a repackaged version of the revolutionary leader to the young to console them. But the repackaged, the sanitized version of the revolutionary leader, we could say the corporate or the Hollywood sponsored version of the revolutionary leader, is hollow, it's empty, it's void of that which it organically contained, which would ignite a new generation of young people to follow in the path of that revolutionary leader, moving the oppressed closer toward liberation. And so we see that throughout all of the corporate sponsored Black History projects. Whenever they present to us a strong and bold Black man or a strong and bold Black woman, be careful, because you're being given an image of one of our great ones where their image is being weakened, deliberately so that the young won't say, I should pick up the baton from Brother Malcolm and keep the struggle alive. I should pick up the baton from Marcus Garvey and keep the struggle alive. I should pick up the baton from Dr. King and keep the struggle alive. And we even discuss in the book how what has been done to corrupt the life story of great Black leaders is analogous to what some of those who handled the Bible did to the life stories of the prophets and messengers of God, where they began to corrupt and add in sordid details of the prophets' lives to present them not as divine servants of God, but as flawed individuals who are really unworthy of emulating. And so there are then really the Black prophets of the Black struggle and the prophets of the Bible and the Quran that need to be vindicated and defended. And you actually have Allah, God, vindicating his prophets from the lies and slander of the biblical writers inside the Holy Quran, when Allah says that my prophets are innocent of what my enemies and their enemies have charged them with. And we, as scholars and researchers, that's a part of our work today, to clean up the histories of those who fought, bled, and died for our people. That work is on our shoulders so that our babies and those that come after us can see them in the true brilliant light that they existed in.
I think that's so powerful and it resonates with me so much because it reminds me of when the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said that he had sat down with Edgar Bronfman, and Edgar Bronfman arrogantly told the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan that if he's not a friend of the Jews, on how the Jews can actually try to write him out of history. And we know that the enemy does not include him and the most honorable Elijah Muhammad in school, in public schools. You know, they'll mention Frederick Douglass, you know, they'll even mention Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr., but they will not mention the most honorable Elijah Muhammad and the honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. So what you said is very powerful, dear brother, that we as the scholars, you know, we have to make their great commissions known, and we have to clean and clear up the histories because the history has been distorted by the enemies of God. So I think that's very, very profound. And also, you know, since we're in a myth busting mood, you know, let's talk about, some of the lies. One lie being, you know, that Malcolm X, you know, had been to Mecca and all of a sudden, he's cool with white people now. And, you know, he's never even experienced being around a white person. Can we kind of talk about some of this, you know, and give some people some insight who may not know?
In the movie that Spike Lee put out, which when you survey the public, you find that most people, their knowledge of Malcolm, you know, the more learned among the people have read Malcolm's autobiography or some of it. But the masses have not even read his autobiography, but they have watched Spike Lee's movie, which in terms of cinematic quality and dramatic portrayal, it's a great film, but it's not the place that should be your principal source for the truth about the life of Malcolm and about what happened to Malcolm during his assassination. And so, you know, with that being said, many people walk away feeling that, you know, Malcolm went to Mecca in 1964. He has an epiphany and he comes back and he begins to oppose the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's teaching. His eyes come open and, you know, he's had this epiphany that he'd been lied to, that there are actually white Muslims, etc., etc., etc. Well, you know, in our book, we took an approach, pardon me, that is a Mythbusters approach, because we recognize that the notion and the overarching myth that the Nation of Islam is responsible for the assassination of Malcolm X, that myth is really a myth that has been built or constructed with certain other subordinate myths. And so the idea was to take away every leg, every subordinate myth, so that the overarching myth then crumbles and dissolves. And so the point that you raised, we spend quite a bit of time on in the book, because we show that, first of all, Brother Malcolm visited the Middle East, and he visited countries that had white Muslims in 1959. He went in 1959, according to author James Tyner, who wrote a book called The Geography of Malcolm X. And I should add, we have over 400 sources in our book. So this is a book of scholarship. It's not a gossip tabloid style book where we just threw something together to try to get the heat off of us in the nation. On the contrary, this is a book that we spent years putting together, that we traveled extensively to research and have very important conversations with key persons. And we produce it at over 350 pages with more than 400 sources. And so I show and I document that Malcolm went because the Honorable Elijah Muhammad had been invited in 1959 to go to the Middle East. And the FBI and the CIA were dragging their feet on giving him and his delegation passports and the appropriate documentation to travel. And so since Malcolm had a passport and he was the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's representative, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad sent him into the Middle East. And so Malcolm went to Arabia, but he did not go into Saudi because he did not want to be the first in the nation to make Hajj or Umrah. He wanted to reserve that right for his teacher, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. But we talk about in the book how he visited countries. Several of those countries are known for having overwhelming populations of what we would call colloquially white Muslims. But we don't, that's not our language, I want to say, white Muslims, because the Holy Quran teaches us that evil is to have a bad name after faith. So any person that is a Caucasian, that is a Muslim, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad says, they are our brothers and sisters in faith. So we don't attach any pejorative designation in describing them of a white Muslim or brown Muslim or anything like that. They are just Muslim. So we're using that term white Muslim advisedly, just for the sake of this conversation, and to refer how it has been used as it is germane to this conversation of Malcolm's so-called epiphany. But he went in 1959. In addition to that, probably for the first time, I think we published, well, it wasn't for the first time, but Imam Warithuddin Muhammad, who also became a practitioner of Sunni Islam and led the pre-1975 Nation of Islam after the departure of his father, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. We show where Imam Muhammad told the British Broadcasting Company that Malcolm was not being forthright and honest when he wrote that he had seen white Muslims for the first time at his Hajj in Mecca. Imam Muhammad candidly told the BBC that, well, Malcolm and I both had been in my father, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's house, and we had had dinner with white Muslims. So that is just the example of the kind of myth busting that this work that we believe Allah guided us to do includes.
Ooh, okay, okay. See, that's what I'm talking about right there. See, y'all don't even understand. Like, this is what our conversations be like in the background when y'all ain't even, you know what I mean? Y'all don't even hear this, but profound. But another myth, right? That we gotta bust up. We gotta bust up the lies. And there's another myth that is going around that the nation kicked Brother Malcolm out of the Nation of Islam. And they say, okay, he was kicked out because he snitched or told on his teacher because he was doing, immoral things. But, that's not even the language that we use as Muslims to say that the brother snitched, because to imply that he snitched is to imply that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was guilty of something. So let's kind of talk about, us supposedly kicking the brother out the Nation of Islam. For those who don't understand, dear brother Demetric.
I believe it was March 11th, 1964. The New York Amsterdam News, as well as the Pittsburgh Courier, carried articles, some calling those articles, quote, Declaration of Independence, or Malcolm Declares Independence. And in these articles, Malcolm is making a public statement that he is leaving the nation. Now, very, very important documents, because again, when we are dealing with research, when we're looking at history, we're looking for that which can be documented. We're not looking for speculation. We're not looking for guesses and assumptions. We're looking for that which we can document. So now people can say what they want to say about why Malcolm left the nation. But number one, Malcolm left the nation. He was never kicked out of the nation. So that's number one. We include in this edition that I have here some very interesting photos. One photo is from the December 29th, 1963 edition of Muhammad Speaks newspaper. I guess I can hold it up here, but you probably can't read it. But somewhere down somewhere in this area, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad says this: I do not classify Minister Malcolm as a hypocrite, for he is no such man according to his work. But I do think that all must be reminded that anything that we do must be in accord with our policy. So here's a very powerful statement being made publicly by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad in December of 1963, after Brother Malcolm had been suspended for violating a policy in the nation that we were not going to make any public statements that would speak into the death of President John F. Kennedy while the country was grieving the assassination of a president. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad did not want to have any of his ministers making public statements that would be insensitive to a grieving nation. Here we are, the Nation of Islam, preaching and teaching our people, seeking to win them over to our way of thinking. It's unwise to be insulting of a man that the people we are seeking to attract love and admire. But Brother Malcolm, in a moment where he was responding to a reporter's question in New York City, he stated that he wasn't really bothered by the assassination of President Kennedy because it was a case of chickens coming home to roost. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad stopped Brother Malcolm at that time from public speaking. Those who were in Mosque number 7 at that time would tell you that as the minister of Mosque number 7, Brother Malcolm continued to carry out his duties as a minister in Mosque number 7. He continued to be supported financially by the believers of Mosque number 7 in the Nation of Islam. And he was given a suspension that was 90 days. And at some point, we learned that it became indefinite, but it was a suspension. Elijah Muhammad is the man that made Minister Malcolm. He made Muhammad Ali great. He made the Honorable Louis Farrakhan. He made Imam Muhammad. He contributed to the development of luminaries and very important figures in Black America. And as a wise teacher who is developing students, he sometimes has to discipline that student to get that student to abide by principles that if the student abides by the principles, the natural gifts, skills, and talents of the student will be honed and polished for the greater good of the student and for the greater good of our people. And so the Honorable Elijah Muhammad set Malcolm down from public speaking for a period of time. And Malcolm, during that period of time, decided that it was time for him to leave the nation. And in that Declaration of Independence, along with a letter that he publicly published that he wrote to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he told the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, I'm not leaving because I no longer believe in your teachings. On the contrary, he said, I'm leaving because I want a greater freedom of mobility to spread your message, to spread your teachings. And now I'm chafing essentially under the organizational confines of the nation's structure. So Malcolm's critique, his reason for leaving, were the structural impediments that he found and some of his disagreements with the national officials in Chicago. But he never leaves because he found that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was an immoral man. He never leaves because he found that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's teachings were false. He never leaves because he found out that there were white Muslims, you know, in Mecca. All of this is a part of the mythology to essentially wrest away Brother Malcolm from being one of those whom the Honorable Elijah Muhammad deserves credit for producing as a man that impacted America and the world. See, they don't want to give Elijah any credit for having done the great work that he did yesterday and that he is doing today. They want to hide that man. So they, once upon a time, Brother Alfonso, the writers and the people at Esquire magazine, they put a political cartoon in the back of Esquire magazine. And in it, it had a cartoon image of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad among other world leaders. And the French world leader, Charles de Gaulle, was on a stage pointing at the cartoon image of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And he said, to my fellow crooks, speaking to the other world leaders, said, we would have a glorious future if it wasn't for this man. And he's pointing at the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So they don't want any of the truth of who that man really is to come to light. Malcolm, you know, learned that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad had followed the path of the previous prophets and messengers of God, and that Allah commanded him to take wives. Malcolm learned it, and he went to Phoenix to tell the Honorable Elijah Muhammad that he knew how to defend the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's taking on of wives according to the scripture. And he even told Louis Lomax that the domestic life of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is a part of his fulfillment of prophecy. So Malcolm was a man that was not deterred by his teacher taking on wives. Fact about it, when you really think about it, I mean, pause to reflect on what we have been told. We were told that Malcolm X left Elijah Muhammad to follow Prophet Muhammad because Elijah Muhammad was wrong and Prophet Muhammad was right. Well, Prophet Muhammad had a domestic life. Prophet Muhammad had wives and he produced children by the command of Allah. So for Brother Malcolm to have a problem with a man who is a messenger of God having wives, then he would have to give up following Prophet Muhammad. He couldn't even follow the prophets of the Old Testament. He couldn't follow Abraham. He couldn't follow David. He wouldn't be able to follow Solomon. He wouldn't be able to follow Moses. You know, there are biblical writers and New Testament scholars even who have pieced together the life of the historical Jesus. And they say they have evidence to raise the question legitimately before scholarly audiences: was Jesus married? So Malcolm did not leave because of any immorality that he found in the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He did not leave for that. This is a part of the mythology that was born to support the notion that the nation killed Malcolm, which the nation did not.
Brother, and you know, and it's so beautiful because you know we face so much opposition, right? And people have all of these nefarious plots and nefarious schemes and narratives, and they really be up on their podium and they be like, yeah, you know, the reason why Malcolm was kicked outside the Nation of Islam and they murdered him is because he found out the truth about Elijah Muhammad and this and that and this and that. But when you come to find out, and by doing the research, you learn that Malcolm had knew about the messenger's domestic life years in advance. He been knew about it, you know, and something where we may differ. I don't know how you may feel about it, but you know, just in my research, you know, what I've come to understand is that Malcolm didn't even have an issue with the messenger's domestic life at all, up until the point where he was getting evicted from his home, and right after the hearing for the eviction, he was outside of the courtroom with his security in front of cameras, and then that's when he came out and accused the messenger of, you know, doing some immoral stuff. And then, you know, the brother went on I just had his name in my mind. You know, he's a white interviewer. He also interviewed the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. I can't think of his name right now. But he went on this guy's show as well and repeated the same things that he said in that press conference. And I say all that to say, Mike Wallace, thank you, brother. He went on the Mike Wallace show and said and repeated the same things. But one thing that stood out to me is that he said that he learned about this from Brother Warf Deen Muhammad. And Warf Deen Muhammad vehemently denied this. And Malcolm said this on several occasions, that he learned this from Warf Deen. So when we study the FBI documents, they say when they learn about the messenger's domestic life and how they wanted to use that to discredit the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So, you know, my question is, you know, what in that sense, you know, was Malcolm part of a conspiracy and didn't know it, and was he a victim of a plot that was greater than himself?
Well, I would say it like this, my brother. First of all, you're right in your timeline assessment. And that's one of the images that we include. You can't see it, but it's up here. And it is from the actual eviction court transcript, where Brother Malcolm was being evicted from the home that the Muslims had purchased as a parsonage for whomever would be the minister of Temple number 7 or Mosque number 7. And since Malcolm had announced that he was no longer going to be their minister, then, well, they had to free up that property so that whenever the Honorable Elijah Muhammad would give them another minister, their minister would have a residence. And so it's during that Malcolm says, I told Captain Joseph and the secretary and the minister in Boston that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad had taken on 9 wives beside the one that he had. Now, to your point, whether he was shared that information by Wallace D. Muhammad, who later became Imam Warithuddin Muhammad, or not, is really, very telling that Malcolm is never portrayed as having identified the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's domestic life as a messenger of God taking on wives. But the official transcript that we have here, he does. And of course, when you have an official court transcript, you have testimony where the person has agreed to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So this is sworn testimony. Brother, nowadays, you and I and others can easily talk about COINTELPRO. We can easily talk about how all of the black groups of the 60s were spied on and destroyed by the FBI and these other government agencies. But while this stuff was taking place, the people who were the victims of the federal government effort to sabotage the Black liberation movement in America, they didn't know anything about COINTELPRO. The public, for the first time, learned of COINTELPRO in 1972 as a result of Senator Frank Church and the Church Committee hearings in Congress. They were investigating what was the intelligence community doing and how they were possibly victimizing American citizens. That's how we learned about COINTELPRO in the general public. So to ask the question, was Malcolm a part of a conspiracy that he didn't know about? Of course. All of the black groups of the 60s era especially, but even before that, what the government would do, they would exacerbate and they would exploit and play up natural, organic, organizational differences. Their whole goal was to divide and conquer. Their goal was to destroy a movement that they didn't like, but to cause it to destroy from within, to create factions, to create groups and parties, to argue against one another, fight each other, kill each other, where their hands could remain clean. So they are those who manipulated all the parties involved. And so, we talk about in the book how Malcolm was being fed information, how the leadership in the nation was being fed information. And this information was being fed to both sides to gin up an internecine conflict and war with the hopes that Malcolm's followers would fight the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's followers, and these two black groups would destroy one another in a bloodbath. So I would have to say that all of those brothers and sisters were being like pieces on a chessboard, where J. Edgar Hoover and the leadership of the ADL and other groups were moving them around as best they could to help bring about their end and their ruination. But what's fascinating also about the episode of the 60s and 70s, as far as the government's efforts to destroy black movements is concerned, is that later memos from the FBI reveal that they lamented internally that they had did all that they knew to do, They had worked as hard as they could, spent millions of dollars, thousands of man hours of labor, media campaigns, you name it, and they still could not destroy or defeat Elijah Muhammad. Now think over that. This is a man that only went to 3 years of formal education. His claim to knowledge, wisdom, and understanding is that he said, everything that I know, God taught me personally and directly, not in a dream or a vision or spirit apparition, but in the form of a man whose name is Master Fard Muhammad. And whatever that man taught Elijah, he gave it to Malcolm Little and made him Malcolm X. He gave it to Lewis Walcott and made him Louis Farrakhan. He gave it to Cassius Clay and made him Muhammad Ali. And he used it wisely and skillfully to avoid being destroyed by the most powerful law enforcement agencies in the world. So that should tell us something about the magnitude of such a man and the wisdom that he possesses.
All praises is due to Allah, brother. When you be when you be teaching, I'll be locked in, brother.
All praises to Allah.
All praises due to Allah. Yes, sir. Okay. So another myth, because what I want to do is I want to deal with some of the myths in this one, and when we do a part 2, I want to deal with our brother's assassination and us being accused of our assassination. And if you have time, we can take some callers. Some
Sure.
people were calling me, while you were speaking, but I just felt that wasn't, formal or right, to be allowing calls while you talking, while you teaching, So we'll save that portion after a couple more questions. Why is it important that we know the ages of the wives of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad? Because they loosely throw the term out. We won't repeat it, but they usually throw out the negative aspect of what Malcolm said, his accusation against the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. But why is it important that we know who these women are and their ages to debunk the myths?
Well, you know, Brother Alfonso, that we go into detail in that section of the book, and we talk about the ages of the wives of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, because we want to prove that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was not a man that was immoral. We want to prove that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is a man whom history and facts vindicate. See, the minister has always taught us as his research team and as those who write in the final call and those who are his students in the ministry. He says, speak the truth. He's never asked us to lie for him. He's never asked us to lie for the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And if Minister Farrakhan finds out that you are lying and you claim to be associated or representative of his, he will disown you and disavow you. So we are not a people who are trained in lies. We are trained with a dogged determination, however, to uncover hidden truths, because we are learning that it is those hidden truths that the enemy has hidden because they are so powerful. They exonerate and they vindicate Black leadership, whom they have hidden these truths to scandalize their name and to slander them. So we don't have any motive for lying for the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. But when you look at the facts, you see that the slander that they charge him with is completely false. I mean, it is so false. You know, the slander is as far away from the truth as the earth is from the sun, if not farther. And that's 93 million miles. So we spend time on it in the book because it's necessary. We live in a day and a time where the abusers of women are being exposed and set down, and rightfully so. For the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught him that a nation can rise no higher than its woman. And that when you abuse a woman, you abuse an entire nation and an entire people. And one of the hidden virtues, or one of the things I would say that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad does not get enough credit for, but scholars are beginning to investigate it and give him that credit, and that is his work to reform and to liberate and to uplift Black women who, prior to them coming to the nation, had been on the lowest rung of American society, behind the white male, the white female, and behind the Black male. But in the Nation of Islam, women could come into the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and achieve to very prominent positions, leadership positions, and where nothing was forbidden them except that which may degrade them in some way, shape, or form. And so this is the legacy that we have to make sure that the public sees, because this episode in the life of Malcolm X, there have been efforts to scandalize the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. But you'll see, for those who read the book, that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is no immoral man. And it's fascinating to me, Brother Alfonso, because just as the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, in this case of Malcolm's assassination, is accused of being an immoral man, the enemies of Islam have historically tried to do the same thing to Prophet Muhammad of Arabia, peace be upon him. They sought to call the Prophet a womanizer. The Orientalist scholars, they wrote of him as a voluptuary, a man who claimed to be a prophet, but was just in pursuit of sensual pleasure. The same thing they did to Prophet Muhammad, the enemies of Black liberation and the enemies of Islam have sought to do to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. But again, what's fascinating and beautiful at the same time is that when you open up the Quranic narrative, you find passages like the introductory passage of Surah 68 entitled The Pen. And in the English translation, it reads like this: by the pen and that which they write, thou art not mad. Surely thou hast sublime morals, and thine is a reward never to be cut off. Well, what are we reading here? We are reading not of the companions of Prophet Muhammad defending him. We're not reading of the family members of Prophet Muhammad defending him, but we're reading of Allah, God himself, defending his righteous servant against the slander of his enemies. And so we follow the example and we defend and vindicate the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Minister Farrakhan by maintaining that these are men who have sublime morals, and theirs is a reward never to be cut off.
All praises is due to Allah. Beautiful answer, black man. Beautiful answer. And I think I want to stop right there. Not as the interview, but I want to start getting into some questions that brothers and sisters want to ask a question. If they want to call in, the numbers on the screen. Because when we do the part two, I want to go into the FBI's plot. You know, in the actual assassination. I want to talk about how the enemy tried to create, you know, the propaganda and try to basically blame it on the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and talk about Jack, I think his name is Jack Newfield, and the plot with Michael Fitzpatrick, and Kabila Shabazz, and I want to get more into that in part two. You know what I mean? So if any brothers and sisters who would like to call in to the show, you can call in. We got our brother Demetric Muhammad. All praises due to Allah. Okay, we got a caller already. 1 second. Peace and
James Muhammad.
To accept, press 1. To send voicemail.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
You
This
are
is Brother James Muhammad from Tampa, Florida.
all praises due to Allah, beloved. You are live on Malcolm Flex TV with our dear brother and special guest, Demetric Muhammad. Your background is a little loud. Can you turn it down
Yes,
so we can
sir.
hear you?
I certainly can, brother.
Okay, yes, sir. Would you like to say anything to our brother, ask a question or anything?
Absolutely. What I'd like to do first and foremost is to commend both of you brothers for such a wonderful show. We appreciate that. And to my brother, student minister Demetric.
We can still hear the background, beloved.
Okay. Yes, sir. Let me mute it then.
Okay,
Okay. How was that?
that's way better. Thank you.
Excellent. Excellent. I just very briefly and to the point wanted to commend both of you, Brother Alfonso and Brother Student Minister Demetric. And Brother Demetric, your scholarly defense of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and the Nation of Islam is incomparable. Truth has its own narrative, and it is sufficient to conquer the lies of the enemy. You're a soldier in this great war, dear brother. You're on the front lines, and we owe you a debt of gratitude for the way you are waging the battle. We thank Allah for you, dear brother, and we thank Allah for you, Brother Alfonso, for providing the platform upon which brothers like Student Minister Demetric can defend the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, the Nation of Islam, and give a proper distillation of the history of Malcolm as it relates to the Nation of Islam, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, and the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Thank you very much. May Allah continue to bless you. I'm going to continue to listen. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam, sir.
All praises due to Allah.
That brother, he's gonna open up next Sunday for sure. All praises due to Allah. So, do we have any more callers? Anybody else like to call in and have a question for our brother? We can definitely have time to take some questions or callers. All praises due to Allah. The brother dropped a lot of information, and I also have a question too, because you have a newly revised version. Where can brothers and sisters get the newly revised version?
It's just a version that we included some research images and some other documentation that we think is important as this book makes its way into the public sector. But it's on researchminister.com. I encourage everybody to go there. We just got a big shipment in, so please support the work. It's a great book that makes a gift for young people. A lot of times in the public school system, they give out the autobiography of Malcolm X. So we would like to have our book become a standard for those in the Black community who are interested in this subject. So it's on researchminister.com. Check it out.
Yes, sir. We got some brothers and sisters who would like to call in. They just asked us to put the number in the chat. And we want to hear some questions, comments. We got our brother. He's so gracious to have us on, so please let it be intelligent discourse, because this brother is a very, this is a man of high integrity. This is my big brother for sure. All praises due to Allah. So we need y'all to call in, ask questions, make your comments. My brother will be happy to accept your question. Assalamu alaikum. You are live on Malcolm
Michael.
Flex TV.
To accept, press 1. To send a voicemail.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam, brother.
Yes, sir. You are live on Malcolm Flex TV with our special guest, Brother Demetric Muhammad. Do you have any questions or comments that you would like to share with our brother?
Yes, sir. How you doing, brother? Okay, I'm so happy, brother Demetric, and you're doing such a great job. I've seen you on many interviews, and you're growing, and it's a beautiful thing to see all of us developing, and just keep up the good work. My question I would like you to speak to, because as I study, this is a soft point for the Nation of Islam. It's the easy point for the enemy to just deceive and mislead our people every single generation. For every decade, it seems like they put out some kind of crazy misinformation. I just want people, if you look at those videos of Malcolm, just speak to the I don't know if you can speak to the emotion that Malcolm felt, because that's what people are using. People are using those those points in time when Malcolm was just truly hurt. He was very emotional, and he was speaking, out of that pain. And I believe, he wanted to hurt people that he was hurt by. I wonder if you can speak to any of that kind of hurt or any of that kind of pain. And then I noticed the Minister Farrakhan did relay that the messenger, I know he said that the messenger did not want anyone to touch Malcolm. And, if you could just speak to that whole situation where, I know there's emotions involved, because people want to believe that the messenger, they just believe some of these really negative things, that I will not.
So just when you ask your question, just give us a clear version of it so we can understand exactly what.
If you could speak to the pain, maybe that Malcolm was in, that maybe caused him to make some statements that could be maybe misleading, or
Okay.
And if you could speak to maybe even the emotions that maybe the messenger had.
Okay, yes, sir. We got it. Thank you, beloved. Assalamu alaikum.
Yeah, that's a very good question, because as we already pointed out, when you look at the timeline of events of what is documented information, we see that in March of '64, Malcolm leaves the nation still pledging his allegiance to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Now, this changes by the time you get to June. Things are moving fast. And from what I can see, and we talk about this in the book, I'm just giving a gloss of it here. But Malcolm was a man inside of a crucible. He was beset on all sides by very trying circumstances. He had, like any man, marital challenges. He had the challenge of being the leader of a religious community. That's his own unique set of challenges. Ask your pastor, ask your imam, ask your minister, what kind of challenges come with that? Right? He was being challenged in the press by the enemies of the nation and the enemies of Black people, as they were writing about him negatively, condemning and criticizing him. Internally, among some of his peers, there were those who may have had some jealousy toward Malcolm. And in addition to that, his teacher was considering whether or not Malcolm could be a worthy one to sit in his seat after his teacher's absence, which then caused his teacher to begin to test him and to try him. And Malcolm was also tried by the rigors of such a pace that he kept up, where Malcolm literally worked 7 days a week. And he was beset by the espionage activities of the federal government, always feeling the need to have security or look over his shoulder, or in one case, as we show in the book, the FBI literally come to interview Malcolm after he had was suspended, seeking to recruit Malcolm to work for them. So Malcolm had a lot of challenges. He was in a very pressurized situation. And when you look at that timeline, you see how there is this radical change after eviction court. And, you know, to me, it felt like reading through it and looking at that period of time that there was a buildup of negative emotions, that his loss in eviction court was kind of like the last straw for him. It kind of pushed him over the edge because, again, a man working 7 days a week, night and day, to help build the nation. And now it looked like the nation was putting him out, him and his family, into the streets to be essentially homeless. You know, Malcolm had not worked and had built up a 401k. He had not worked anyway. He was still a young man. So even if he had it, he couldn't have any pension or retirement. He had no other, what you would call, you know, mainstream 9-to-5 jobs before he became a Nation of Islam minister. So just running out, a man with a wife and a growing family, finding a home would be difficult and challenging. And so it's like Malcolm said, I did all of this for the nation, and then you're all going to put me out in the street. And I think that really psychologically and emotionally hurt Brother Malcolm. But here is the balance to Malcolm's emotion. Again, we all can bear witness. Whenever we are thinking and reacting to a situation emotionally, oftentimes we're not thinking with the best of reason. You know, our emotions, or as the young people say nowadays, you know, you get caught up in your feelings, you know, and certainly we can't trivialize Brother Malcolm's feelings. However, the important thing to reflect upon, again, are the facts of history. Now, in James Nagy, who wrote a book called The History of Temple Number 7, we discuss how in his book, he was a part of Mosque Number 7 when Brother Malcolm appealed to the believers of Mosque Number 7 that they should purchase a home for the minister. And of course, since he was the minister, he would live in it, provided he remained their minister, or for however long he would be their minister. And so they agreed, and as Najee put it, this was during a time when most of the members of the mosque were poor, and very few owned their own home. So Malcolm did not make his pitch to the believing community as though, I need y'all to buy me a house. You know, he understood that probably wouldn't be, he couldn't get a lot of buy-in for that kind of pitch, because you're talking to people who don't, by and large, own their own homes. But you could rally and get support for a home for the minister of the mosque. So if Malcolm is the minister, he lives in that home. If John is the minister, he lives in that home. If Charles is the minister, whoever is the minister, they live in their home. Now, whether or not Malcolm thought this through or not, I don't know. But on March 11th, newspapers were carrying stories that Malcolm's leaving the nation. So what does that mean? He's leaving being the minister of Mosque number 7, since Mosque number 7 is the nation's mosque in New York. Now, again, if you're not going to be the minister of the mosque, you have to vacate that property. And since he was announcing he's starting his own organizations, then if he's going to be a minister or spiritual leader in those organizations, it would be left up to those who are the members of those organizations to help support him and his family. And so even though Malcolm felt hurt that he was being evicted, you know, the judge didn't make it immediate. He gave him some time. But even though he was hurt, that did not mean that he was correct. And so that's, again, a sensitive point, because you can understand a man feeling how he feels, but you have to say in hindsight, perhaps he should have made arrangements to have other living quarters for him and his family, because this kind of thing is common. You know, if a church hires a minister and the church, that's a job offer. So that comes with benefits, salary, maybe health coverage, and oftentimes housing, either as an expense that's in addition to salary, or the church will offer what is called a parsonage, which is a personal residence for the pastor of the church. Now, if you agree to live there, you don't have to agree to live in the parsonage. But if you agree to live there, then you live there understanding that that's not your home. That's the home of the church. And if you ever decide to go, or they fire you, you know, because churches do fire pastors, you know, that's a reality. Ask any of your friends in ministry. You know, it ain't all peaches and cream, you know, all the time. But long story short, if you're not the spiritual leader of that community anymore, you have to relinquish that property. And so that, I believe, caused Malcolm to lash out emotionally. So in the court, sworn testimony, he uses one language. But then in front of the media, he uses this salacious language of slander, you see. And we talk about it in detail in the book. But the last thing I will say, Brother Alfonso, to my brother's question, is that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad did give instructions to everybody to leave Malcolm alone. And people who don't know the history of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, they don't know that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad had dealt with defectors and had dealt with people inside the nation who were in opposition to him before. And he never resorted to violence.
Right.
In fact, the beginning of his ministry, you see that there were those who followed Master Fard Muhammad. But when Master Fard Muhammad left Elijah Muhammad in charge, they didn't agree with his decision. So they opposed the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And instead of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad fighting with them or killing them, he just fled the scene. And he went about the work of the assignment that Master Fard Muhammad had put him on. He traveled up and down the East Coast. He spent many hours studying in the Library of Congress. And he left Detroit and Chicago, even though the hypocrites who were against him, they were pursuing him. But he told Minister Farrakhan, he said, brother, I did not run from them because I didn't have power or I was afraid of them. But I was hoping that in time they would understand that Allah, God, had chosen me and ultimately stop being a hypocrite towards me. And people who were close to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad would tell you he believed Malcolm would come back. In fact, after Brother Malcolm was assassinated, they interviewed the Honorable Elijah Muhammad in some of the papers, and he said that he hoped that Malcolm would come back humble. He never thought or never had any hope that that kind of man would be killed. No, that's not the character of messengers of God. See, that might be the character of a political leader. That might be the character of a gang leader. That might be the character of some type of mob boss or underworld figure. But whether you believe the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is the messenger of Allah or not, he believes it, and those of us who are with him believe it too. So if a man believes he's the messenger of God, just think through it with me. This man believes he's the messenger of God. Then he believes he has a relationship with God, and he believes that he has a power not to destroy people, but to save people, because that's the purpose of messengers and prophets of God. They are not necessarily commanded to pick up a sword. They are commanded to save the people. Now, there were incidences where prophets had to fight to defend themselves in the believing community, but the mindset of a messenger of God is to save everyone. And so you read of it even in the Quran as it relates to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. He had some of his own people oppose him. Some of them came to follow him, and they turned hypocrite on him and left away and went back to a life of sin and immorality. And in the Quran, Muhammad is grieving over this. And Allah comforted Muhammad. He said, Muhammad, I have not raised you to be a watcher over them. In other words, Muhammad, I haven't assigned you to be responsible for all of the actions of the believers. He said, I have raised you to deliver the word to them. But because the prophet is tenderhearted and loves the people, not wanting to see the people suffer, perish, or incur the wrath of Allah, he's grieved. He's not moved of vindictiveness. And if you look at Elijah Muhammad's history, you don't find a man moved by vindictiveness. You find a man that was willing to take insult, to take abuse by people whom he concluded were just simply ignorant of his mission. He would say of his critics, he said, oh, brother, they don't have my assignment. So they don't know what I'm missioned to do, so I don't expect them to understand. They may understand in time. So it has to be clarified that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was not a vindictive leader who harbored malice in his heart toward Malcolm, who really was in a way like a prodigal son. And we show in the book, and maybe we can get to that in part 2, how Malcolm was trying to come back home.
Yeah, that's a beautiful answer, brother. I want to get into this next question from another one of our viewers, Gabriel Lopez. Brother Gabriel Lopez, he said, do we, no, I don't think this is the one, excuse me. We'll get to that. We'll get to that one next. It says, what should be the legacy we remember of Brother Malcolm X of his 12 years with the messenger?
Well, that's just it. His 12 years with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. That's Malcolm X. I mean, I think if you do the math, 52 to 62 is 10 years. 63 is 11 years. So maybe 11 years and 4 months or 3 months that he was, or 2 months and some change, that he was with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So we say 11 years and 2 months. Versus from March of 64 to February of 65 versus 11 months. So it's easy again to see that Malcolm X is the man from 52 through March of 64, who was an avowed defender, ardent supporter student helper and spokesman for the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam. From March of 64 to February of 1965, we see a man who was very internally conflicted, who vacillated back and forth from different positions and different attitudes, different levels of understanding. And the final level of understanding that he came to, he never got a chance to publicly express. And that was that, number one, I'm going to organize Black people to take over Harlem. Number two, it's not the Nation of Islam that's trying to kill me. So those were like some real epiphanies that should be given more time in public discourse. But, you know, they only want to talk about Mecca because Mecca fits a predetermined narrative, you see. But the real Malcolm is a man we know and love. And I was having a conversation once with our national archivist, student minister Carlos. And he was talking about, you know, Malcolm's legacy is still impactful inside the nation because the style of rostrum presentation that Malcolm brought continues, at least in part, up until this day and time. Because prior to Malcolm becoming the great minister that he was, you have to remember, Malcolm died at 39. So Malcolm was in his 20s and 30s as the leading minister for the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Now, the reason why that's significant is because when Malcolm began to preach and the people became attracted, it was very startling because prior to Brother Malcolm, many of the ministers, they were older men, and their style of preaching and representing the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was consistent with their age and their time period. So Malcolm was a young man, and his fiery, articulate, passionate, witty, broad-based style of representing the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's teachings continues up until this day in time. Certainly as a student of Brother Malcolm, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan developed a style similar to Brother Malcolm's style. And so any of us who are students of Minister Farrakhan,
That's right,
seek to represent him in the way he represents the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, we cannot but help then have in our way, in our style, aspects of Malcolm's style. So Malcolm's legacy continues even in the nation today.
Brother Demetric. We got a caller on the line, and they would like to ask you a question. Sorry to cut your bill. Peace, brother. What's your name and where you calling from?
Yes, I'm Brother Trump, calling from Mount Holly, New Jersey.
Yes, sir. Go ahead and ask. Yeah, go ahead, black man.
Yes, I had a question about the relationship between Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X. I've been getting kind of like mixed messages on there. I just wanted to know if Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali met before he was invited to the training camp when he was getting ready to fight Sonny Liston.
Well, Malcolm, well, let me put it like this. There is a popular narrative that Malcolm was responsible for bringing Cassius Clay into the Nation of Islam. But if you go back a few years ago, there was a documentary produced by Muhammad Ali's wife, Khalila Ali. And in that documentary, which was a great documentary, she included Minister Abdul Rahman Akil Muhammad, who was the first actual person to introduce Cassius Clay to the Nation of Islam. However, in that documentary, he said that when he met Cassius Clay had already heard Minister Farrakhan's album, who was Minister Louis X at that time, an album, a song the minister had written called "The White Man's Heaven is the Black Man's Hell." So it was at that time that Minister Rahman, who was Captain Samuel X. Saxton of Muhammad's Temple number 29 in Miami at that time, he then took Cassius Clay under his wing, taught him the message of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and was his early mentor in Islam, and was the first person to take Cassius Clay to Nation of Islam events where he met Malcolm X and met other Muslim ministers and met the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and met the believers. So they did have a relationship, but it was not the relationship of teacher to student. It was the relationship of two brothers, one who was already in the nation and working out, Brother Malcolm, and then it was Cassius Clay who was coming into the nation because he had a big fight in the Miami area. And when Brother Captain Samuel met him, and he tells the story wonderfully of how he embraced the brother, helped nurture him into Islam, and helped to get him to, he had some white handlers at that time who were part of a group of Louisville businessmen. And they are part of the documentary and talk about how, you know, they weren't really treating our brother as a professional. Okay, he was young. He had been an Olympian, so he's a young man. And, you know, when you're a young man, you know, you don't know your value. You don't know your worth. You know, people around you, they give you a few dollars, you know, give you food, clothing, and shelter, put you in a hotel, and, you know, you think you're doing good. And so when he got with Captain Sam and he saw what was going on, Captain Sam, who became Minister Rahman, he said, brother, you are worth more than what they have told you you are worth. Have them to purchase you a home. Have them to hire you a cook. Have them to do certain things for you. And so Minister Rahman had Muslim sisters to become the cooks for Cassius Clay, because, you know, a fighter's nutrition is everything. You got a bad diet, you know, I don't care how much training you do, the real training is in the kitchen. So, you know, all of this is pre-Malcolm X, you know. So, yeah, they had a relationship. And I know there was recently a book that came out, I think called Blood Brothers or something like that. That came out that tries to, you know, hype up that and basically try to argue that Ali abandoned Malcolm. And, you know, all of this we demystify in the book. See, because we help to highlight the point that we are not talking about political figures. This ain't, you know, a Black Muslim version of Game of Thrones. This is a religious community. These are spiritual people, not perfect, not without flaw, not without spot or blemish, but their religious belief is the motivating factor for their actions. So when the Nation of Islam reacts negatively toward Malcolm's publicly scandalizing of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's name, is not born of motivations of political considerations or envy of these kinds of things. Is born out of how but religious people defend he whoever is the fountainhead of their faith. And in fact, when you get into the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, you find that there is a duty upon believing men and women, not just to fast, not just to pray, not just to give alms to the poor, but also to be defenders of the faith. So when Ali began to defend the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, it was not like how they try to portray it. He's dissing Malcolm. He's hating on Malcolm. No, Malcolm, prior to his leaving the nation, had been the leading defender of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He modeled the way for everybody else to learn how to defend the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So when he became an opponent of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, then everybody else emulated what Malcolm had heretofore been the best exemplar of, and that was they closed ranks around the leader of the Nation of Islam, the messenger of Allah, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So they did have a relationship, but it's not identical to what the corporate sponsored narratives who want to corrupt Black history so Black youth don't follow in their footsteps have given to us.
That's a beautiful answer. I have a question. What are your thoughts on the portrayal of Malcolm X in the Godfather of Harlem, and what are your thoughts on the documentary overall of the documentary of Who Killed Malcolm X? Because I noticed the minister, he wasn't really even mentioned in that documentary. So, what are your thoughts on those two recent works that came out?
Well, I think they leave a lot to be desired. And I think that The Godfather of Harlem is a very destructive work in that, is one thing for a documentarian to do a documentary and giving you a look at an episode of history through their eyes. That's honest. That is what it is. So the documentary, I'm less concerned about it than I am the completely fictional tale of Godfather of Harlem. A documentarian could make a mistake. A documentarian could add his bias or his political ideological leanings to the presentation of his documents. But when you talk about using the broad brush of creative license to completely repaint actual figures of history, such that when that is done and that is rolled out into an atmosphere where there will be more people who have watched The Godfather of Harlem than people who have read books about Adam Clayton Powell, Malcolm X, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, then you run the risk that the histories of these great ones in the Black community, the true history, will be replaced in the minds of a lot of people by a television show that is not put on by people who love the Black community, not put on by a company that's interested in preserving the legacy of Adam Clayton Powell and Malcolm X and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So they don't care. They are trying to put together something that is entertaining. So they don't mind in the course of making something that's entertaining to sacrifice truth. See? And quite frankly, my personal belief, based upon how all three of those great men, Malcolm, Adam Clayton Powell, and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, at certain points when they were here with us, they were called anti-Semites. See, that raises a red flag for me. Because if you ever had that scarlet letter placed on you, then those who call you an anti-Semite they make sure that follows you even in death. And so they now are involved in, I believe it is what Robert Greene wrote about, maybe as Law 42 or Law 48 in his book, The 48 Laws of Power, where he describes the age-old tactic: strike the shepherd and the sheep will scatter. So what you have is, dear brother, great black men are being struck so that the black masses who might draw inspiration from them remain in disarray and scattered, not able to access inspiration from these historical figures because you present them on the big screen as, less than what they were. You don't give you the full picture of who they were. You don't talk about why they are meaningful to their people. Elijah Muhammad did what no other man did. He formed the black people into a nation inside of America. He established his own flag, his own school system, his own economic system. He advanced his own theology. And now you will have him besmirched in Godfather Harlem. Adam Clayton Powell was not some common, ordinary politician. He was a man that, in the midst of his own personal failings, as we all do, we all have our own personal failings. None of us do the work that we do, whether it is in scholarship, whether it is in activism, whether it is in ministry, whether it is in any other kind of service to the people. We don't do it from a place where we don't have no sin. We don't do it from a place to where we are perfect or without flaw. But when you present historical figures in the public for future generations to study and look at, you show your true motive by what you highlight, what you emphasize, what you amplify within a historical figure. And since our enemies now have seized control over Black history, they now are painting men who fought them. Think about it now. There's an old African proverb, you see it all the time. They say that the story of the hunt is altogether different when the lion can tell his story. See, but as long as the hunter tells the story, you get the hunter's version of events. But if the hunted one can tell his story, then history looks altogether different. So here you have men who fought the white power structure, and then a white power structure wants to educate you about these men that fought them. How could you expect, again, as the Honorable Elijah Muhammad says, that people who won't treat you right to be people who would teach you right?
That's a beautiful, beautiful response, beautiful answer. And somebody land-backed off my question with the question. I'd rather say land-back than piggyback because we don't do no swan. They said, the brother Gabriel said, the movie Malcolm X by Spike Lee gave a positive and strong image of him. Why did they switch it in The Godfather of Harlem?
They switched it, brother, because they no longer have use for Brother Malcolm. And see, this is predictable. I was reading an article just a few days ago where some of the people who are noticing how statues of racist Confederates and Klan leaders are being taken down throughout the country. The writer of this article was arguing that, well, if we're going to be taking down statues, we might as well take down the statues of Malcolm X because he was a racist, he was a bigot, he was an anti-Semite. And I read the article, I said, wow, since the late 80s, mainstream media has lionized Brother Malcolm, has made him the patron saint of Black youth, made him the patron saint of Black militancy, all unbeknownst to many people, to oppose the living leadership of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And now, since that didn't really work, they are discarding Brother Malcolm once again and allowing their true sentiment that they wrote of. See, again, a research lesson. You want to use sources that are as close to the subject and as close to the time period of the subject as you can. So when believing what does America feel about Malcolm, you have to say, well, let's look at when Malcolm was here. How did they feel about it? Because the way they feel about him now is artificial. Because when someone is gone or deceased, you can say whatever you want to say about them. They're not here to refute that. You can say that they were good when they were actually bad. You can say that they were bad when they were actually good. See, they're not here. You can do what you will based upon whatever righteous or wicked motive that you may have. So they are trashing Brother Malcolm because he could not be used successfully for the destruction of Minister Farrakhan and the rebuilt nation of Islam. So now they discard him. They don't need him anymore.
Brother, that is a powerful answer. I almost knocked my mic over. Because that was a beautiful answer, because we see it, we see it in real time. Yeah. You know, and I thank the brother for asking that question.
Good question.
And Allah inspired the brother to answer that question, because we actually witnessing, how they truly feel about the brother, because they didn't care about the brother when he was alive, but we were fooled and deceived into believing that they actually gave a damn about the brother after the brother is gone. But like you always mention in the book, that they could care less about Malcolm when he was here. They was running from Malcolm X when he was alive. You know what I mean? So they used it as an opportunity to attack the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, which we will go into on part 2 of this particular series, because we 2 hours in, we got about 60 viewers still in the video watching. Shout out to all the brothers and sisters who are tuned in, locked in for this wonderful scholarship that we are receiving from our special guest, Brother Demetric Muhammad. This brother is powerful. I mean, this brother took this live stream and took it to another level. All praises is due to Allah. All praises by the grace of Allah. And we will go into it a little bit deeper on the assassination, because, the main deal breaker with many brothers and sisters, which is somewhat understandable, that the Nation of Islam, the narrative that the Nation of Islam assassinated Brother Minister Malcolm X, which is far from the truth. You know what I mean? And it would look like we had something to do with it with untrained eyes. But when you get into the actual testimony of Thomas Hagen, you know what I mean? He played a key role in the assassination and the plot of Minister Malcolm X. And it's shocking that those who accuse us know anything about this man. Those who accuse us don't know anything about any of the stuff that this man said in regards to the plot of Malcolm X and the Nation of Islam's involvement. So I don't want to give too much, because our brother, the brother has a lot of information. If you have his book, please purchase his book. Please read the book so you all can stay in tune with where we're going. You can actually walk this journey with us. A lot of these questions that I'm asking the brother is coming out of the book, and the brother is giving you answers. If you read the book, then he's basically saying this stuff word for word out of the book, and he's not even looking or reading at the book. That goes to show you how invested this man is in this research. Because it's something to where you can learn something and then you forget about it, but when you learn it and it becomes a part of you, and you able to speak it without looking at notes, without looking at papers and stuff like the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, it says a lot about a person. So if nobody has any more questions, we can in this live stream. So, dear brother Demetric, can you share with the brothers and sisters, because I know these things was going crazy at Savior's Day, can you let them know where they can purchase the book and get the newly revised versions, so they can have these images that you just recently put in your new revised version?
Yes, sir, my brother. Go to researchminister.com. Researchminister.com. And order it so that you can get this book, which is the first book in 55 years since the assassination of Malcolm X, authorized by the Nation of Islam. So this is a book that is authorized and supported by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. There are words directly from Minister Farrakhan in this book. And when we come back next time, talk more about certain things that the minister shared with me. But for lack of better language, you could consider this an official Nation of Islam response to the charge that we killed Malcolm X. So I want to encourage you to get it and read it and share with us your thoughts about it. We have done the research. We are presenting to you humbly and sincerely our findings, and we welcome to hear from you what you think about what we believe is a work that Allah, God, guided us to complete. So I thank you, Brother Alfonso, for your time. I thank those who took time out of their schedules to be with us tonight. And we have to do it again sometime real soon.
Yes, sir. All praises due to Allah. We gotta definitely do a part 2 to this, because we can't leave the brothers and sisters, basically hanging on the cliff and not really getting into. We definitely got into the meat of this today, but really getting to that part, to where we gotta patch that up. And I think that you're the man to get the job done, because you were sanctioned by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and blessed by the minister to do what you're doing and being on this specific mission. And we thank you and we appreciate you so much for that, dear beloved. And also, I would like to say to brothers and sisters, if you see my shirt, we printing our own shirts. We might even print a shirt up for Brother Demetric Muhammad. But didn't you kill Malcolm, specifically for him? We got face masks, we got paraphernalia that your brother is printing up, and I'll post a link in the chat to the website, that I got my own shirts. Let me show y'all a little some of the work that we're doing. Okay. We got with the Nation of Islam with the Martin font and the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air fonts. Okay. And my website is, okay, they stopped me from posting the website, but I'll fix it. But anyway, the website is www.deadnationarise.com. I get the name Dead Nation Arise or DNA out of the Supreme Wisdom, and message to the laborers, where Master Muhammad said that the dead nation must arise at once. You know what I mean? So we got it from the Supreme Wisdom. Go ahead and support your brother. I like to shout out to all the brothers and sisters who tuned in to Malcolm Flex TV. You've been wonderful. Please be ready and stay tuned for part 2 with our great and powerful and humble brother Demetric Muhammad. And I'd like to thank you, and we appreciate you again, black man, for tuning in. And we getting ready to check out. Okay? So peace and assalamu alaikum, family.
Wa alaikum salam.